I'm speaking today with Nishant Modak.
Failures are such an important part of our lived experiences, whether they are through whatever journeys. A common question I have to ask is, can you build a self-driving car with a 140 pixel camera? Path led us to starting the company to be able to see is autonomous operations in the world of software really possible. Right? The code never misbehaves because
Yeah.
it's a way to be able to deterministically and formally prove already. What's more often than not is the first company I did and the product I did was actually crowdfunded to make sure that there's enough demand around it. First time founders are a sacrifice to the god of entrepreneurship, right? So that was pretty much my experience.
A founder's journey is a very inside looking journey. It's a very lonely journey. You have to deal with yourself. You have to.
As much as GTM sounds like a structured playbook that everybody has figured out, I want to be honest. I don't think anybody has it figured out until the flywheel starts kicking in some ways for it to actually grow on its own, right?
Hi, Nishant. Welcome to Scale to Zero. Uh, I I've been meaning to talk to you. I've been meaning to invite to you on Scale to Zero for our audience. Uh, I'm speaking today with Nishant Modak. He's founder and CEO of Last9, and it is a coincidence where I did not know about him that he's from the same hometown I grew up in India, and we went to the same undergrad college. Although he's few years junior to me, but still wasn't aware until I ran into him when we both started and started to build our own startups. And I always felt that from my hometown to that college and a startup, I'm the last one. I'm the only one. And and then I was like, oh my God, there's more folks, right, who's doing some good stuff, and we have kept in touch. We have seen each other's journey. We bother each other with some difficult questions, and I felt that on Scale to Zero, where we have been talking just security or go to market for security companies, we felt we should open it up to talk to founders who can share their wisdom, who can share their journey, and inspire others to start their own journey. So Nishant, welcome, happy New Year, and I can't kick off this year with a better uh, conversation, with a better thing to do than to speak to you.
Thanks, Sujay, for such a lovely welcome. Obviously, great to chat with you, and a happy new year to you and everybody who's a regular listener. Uh, Thanks for the invite. Looking forward to chat and discuss.
So you are in California right now, and you moved from India. You have been a traveler. I know. We know your journey. How did this thing of Last 9, because I want to set the context, and we'll go back and forth. We'll go to maybe your childhood if you are open to talk about it. We'll talk about a lot of stuff. But let's start with Last 9, and to the audience, something happened. We were about to start recording, and the mic didn't work. Something didn't work, and we're all trying to figure out what happened. Something was not possible through the software, so a few retakes. I want to connect that to Last 9. I think somewhere at the core, what Last 9 is solving is this: like, how, where's the problem? How do we figure it out? And you help figure out that problem, I guess. I'm too simplifying it, I'm oversimplifying it, but I thought about that, and I'm like, what a coincidence, it can't get any better than something is going wrong, and Last 9 is there to help. So yeah, go ahead, Nishant.
Yeah, no, I think super interesting, right? That failures are such an important part of our lived experiences, whether they are through whatever journeys. But at the same time, it's never 100% in anything. But what matters is being able to push those boundaries of Last 9s to achieve that perfection and aim for that 1% more every day. Honestly, the journey of Last 9 began. I say this a lot, right? Engineers coming from an engineering background and at heart still being an engineer first more than anything else. Uh, Founders are just people who, as engineers who stick with a problem long enough and don't decide to give up end up being founders, right? Because they really want to see that problem being solved in a big way.
Correct.
And I think that's very
Correct.
crucial to have that perspective. And in the case of Last9, what that translates into is we all deal with these failures constantly. But the core problem is,
Mm-hmm.
interestingly, at scale and with complex systems, how do people reason and resolve those is a very fascinating thing to think about and reason about across different situations. And honestly, at the crux of it, Last9 started because of that, obviously, through my own engineering and leadership experiences over the years of building systems at high scale and things like that. But really about what does failure mean? What does it mean to be able to push the boundary of reliability? And not too different from security, right? It's just that
Yeah.
security is a reliability problem that also involves legal. That's the big difference.
Oh yes. I I tell my team, I tell my customers, we are not in the business of security. We are in the business of trust. I feel the same way about Last9. Uh, your users, your customers rely on you that when things go wrong, I was going to say something else, but things go wrong, you would hold their hand, guide their way into the problem where the problem is, and bring them back to life, bring them back to the business. What inspired you to start this company? You mentioned that you wanted to solve this problem in the way which, like engineers, but what transpired beyond that? Because it's a pretty long journey, it's a pretty tough journey. So tell us a little more, like, were the tools were not good out there, they were not helping in the right way, and you had this aha moment. What was that like?
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily one single moment that transpires you to say, oh, wait, I'm going to spend 10 years of my journey on or more probably for a life to solving that problem, right? I
Yeah.
think it was an accumulation over years to understand what was really going on, what the struggles were, etc. But there were a few moments in particular that shift how you think about the world, right? I remember 2014, I visited California probably for the first or second time, visiting
Mhm.
the Computer History Museum, and right in front in the center was Tesla uh, at
Nice.
as a showcase, and that threw me down a very different world in terms of what did it mean for running systems at scale. You always thought that running systems at scale and traffic being one of the one that we all encounter in a physical system to be
Yeah.
so onerous,
Yeah.
uh, to be the hardest one to automate, right? But
True.
turns out it wasn't that difficult a problem because of how you approach it and how you solve for it. Now, the way I'm using that as a reference point is because it's interesting in terms of what does it translate into for what I do or what I think about obsessively. It was almost to the degree is that uh, what was the underlying moment for self-driving cars to be possible, right? And I'm going to use that as an
Yeah.
example. It's interesting because
Sure.
unless you have high fidelity cameras, you can't really build
Mm.
a self-driving car, right? Because can you build it?
True.
A common question I have to ask is, can you build a self-driving car with a 140 pixel camera, right? And will you rely and give it control? Now, that's a fascinating parallel because what I look at when engineers run their complex systems, not too different than traffic patterns of different kinds in a virtual world,
Right.
and struggle with auto healing to a degree that at least sounds like the true north given the world of AI that we live in.
Right. Right.
Given
Right.
that as a parallel, we are like, okay, wait, the high fidelity camera has to exist as a first thing before you can even have the feedback loops going in. Every engineer
Correct.
fundamentally knows, right? Observability and feedback loops are the two crucial pieces that make something work, take,
Right.
or the classical OODA loop, if you want to call it, uh, which is observe,
True. True.
orient,
True.
right? Decide and act. Uh,
Yeah.
what did it mean for
Yeah.
our software system? What did an auto healing system look like? What does a self-driving car in production look like for a software engineer? Was honestly the big picture to say, oh, is that even possible? And if it's not possible, it's a big enough problem that we all deal with and are very close to. What are the intermediate steps to go and take a stab at it that you can actually make commercially viable? So one thing led to another, and on that path led us to starting the company to be able to see, is autonomous operations in the world of software really possible? And we're still on the journey, a long way to go. But it's an interesting parallel to think about in terms of how do you think about systems in general, and what does it mean to sort of go along that path. Obviously, a lot of more intermediate steps, and it's a longer answer at this point, but I'll give a clear articulation of it in terms of the way I learned from the world of self-driving cars to be able to say there's honestly four stages, right? There is hands off. You had first cruise control,
Correct.
then you had adaptive cruise control,
Yeah.
right? But it was
Yeah.
limited to that. And then nothing else happened for a long time until only the sensors kept improving and things like that. Now, but
Right.
if you have to break it down into stages, it went from cruise control, adaptive cruise control, to hands off, legs off, eyes off, and off the seat, right? That is the level 4 driving, which is completely
Yeah.
autonomous in that
Yeah.
regards. Now, it's fascinating
Yeah.
to think about
Yeah.
that because I almost think cloud was the first cruise control in some ways for operations,
Yeah.
or at least
Yeah. Yeah.
elastic
Yeah.
load balancing was a adaptive cruise
Yeah.
control, if you will. But again, we've been stuck
Yeah.
there. And then what is a parallel for us to really push forward on that journey continues to fascinate me in terms of just systems and as a problem solving. Obviously,
Nice.
the rise of AI over the last few years has given a big boost to it. So it remains a very
Yeah. Yeah.
exciting
Yeah.
space to operate in. But a longer answer to be able to give you a perspective in terms of what just where the world is going and what the parallels look like.
No, it's a fascinating answer. I'll tell you why. The more you're talking about like the analogy, and I like the analogy, uh, little I could have thought that somebody is looking at a Tesla and thinking about something like Last9. So kudos to that. But have you read this book, Thinking in Systems? Have you ever heard about this book, Thinking in
I
Systems?
have not, but would love to know.
I would uh, I would highly recommend you pick a copy of that. I love that book. At the very beginning of that book, the author talks about, hey, we all know 2 plus 2 equal to 4. And most of the time, our emphasis on the 2 and the 4. We do not spend a lot of time on that plus. What does this plus means? How does this transpires into bringing everything together sort of thing, right? So when you were talking about the the cameras, I think that was that plus, because maybe a lot of time was spent on all the other things of an autonomous car. Maybe that missing piece. I think Tesla figured it out. So tell us, what did you figure out? Like, what was your high resolution camera like? What is Last Nine's high resolution camera? How is it different? And I'm not asking this question from like why your product is cool, but when we establish few things, I want to take our conversation further into, as a founder, what was that like initial days and stuff like that. So I'm just setting the ground right now.
Yeah. No, that's a very interesting parallel, right? Because fundamentally, when you observe something, the core reason is if we step back and when you're talking about failures in the software system, right? We're talking about the most usual colloquial way to be able to think about it is incidents. Now, and when you think about
Hmm.
incidents, especially before the Gen AI world, when software is supposed to be deterministic, right? So the code you write
Right.
will work the way it is written. It's not going to just change completely because it's in production or it's in a different temperature. I mean, in extreme cases, but especially in a different environment, uh, right? Now,
Yeah.
the fundamental difference there is, so what does it mean when an incident happens? Does it mean that the code misbehaved? Never actually, right? The code never misbehaves because
Yeah.
it's a way to be able to deterministically and formally prove already. What's more often than not is the human understanding of what the code was supposed to do has diverged
Right.
from where it is today, right? So if
Right.
you imagine somebody to draw on a whiteboard, let's say, what does a production system look like? They'll draw and design it. Uh, I call them
Right.
as systems as designed. And when you run into production and are looking through all the telemetry, you'll look at it and say, wait, I didn't even know this worked this way, which is systems as discovered, right? Now,
Yeah. Oh,
systems
wow.
as imagined
Amazing.
and
Yeah.
systems as discovered on production are there's a massive delta in that always. So the real problem is the human mental model of what actually should exist versus what exists is constantly
Right.
diverging. And this happens for a lot of reasons because obviously there are hundreds of people contributing to production. It's in a constant flux, especially in cloud. The problem becomes even 100x because the ephemeral nature of it makes it so
Yep.
that things are constantly changing, right? In a constantly
Right.
changing world, then the problem of observability or the high fidelity camera becomes can in real time you can infer relationships across these wide properties or instances or in a technical perspective services or apis and all kinds of this virtual nodes that exist in the conceptual mind of
Yeah.
a human, and can you relate it back in a human way to understand, to be able to debug it quickly, right? Can you reason about it in a human way
Nice.
because the data exists? And more often, it's not just always that more data solves a problem. What solves for it is it under a telescope or is it under a regular camera, right? That fidelity allows you to look at it
Mm-hmm.
with different aspects. The way it translates into slightly going more on the, because the question relates to the fidelity of data. Fidelity of data, what
Mm-hmm.
happens is in the context of production systems deals with two kinds of problems. There are different dimensions of data, and there are different values for that data, right? Uh, and
Okay.
both create different challenges around underlying time series databases. That is the crux of the
Mm-hmm.
problem that just cascades further downstream because it means everything that you are capturing has to be stored correctly and be able to use not just necessarily correlated across the stack. Imagine a configuration changing, which sits completely
Yeah.
outside of a system related to the code, but affects the performance of the code and also how users experience it in terms of error rate. These are
Oh yeah.
completely
Oh yeah.
disparate changes, or AWS changing or throttling something, or completely different, or your external party that you're dependent on as a third party API, making changes that are now
Yeah.
affecting your endpoint. This is almost a
Yeah.
graph, if you will, in some ways. So, how do you
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah. Yeah.
maintain
Yeah.
that context graph and infer information so that humans can quickly react and respond to it? Is the part of the fascinating challenge. Cardinality or fidelity, I was mentioning, is only the part where a lidar can help solve for it, right? Or a 360 camera can help visualize everything in a way that the response time is more important. I think there's a combination of bunch of these things where the fundamental problem is making it human solvable, explainable or
Sure.
humanly reasoned across all that massive data set, and then being able to make
Right.
sense of it and then act on it in real time, not something to avert the problem in the first place.
So so if you go back to the first principles, like the problem we are talking about, or the solution you are putting together, there's few building blocks, uh, and I want you to expand on that and help me understand what you have learned over time, uh, and then we'll switch gears. So you have been building Last9 what, like now 5 years,
Yes.
little over 5 years,
Yeah. Almost 6 years. Yes.
close to 6 years. I'm sure your understanding, product understanding, has evolved immensely. You knew how to approach a problem, maybe directionally, but now you are so much into it. So what are, like, so high fidelity data is one building block. Able to correlate almost in real time is another building block. Like basic, what else is there? What comes together where the user is like, oh my god, Last9 saved me, and And maybe if you can take name of any one of your customers. I know some of your customers. I don't want to name any because, I don't want to put you on spot, but I know for a fact that your proudest moment is supporting a streaming company, if I can call them just that, or any other example, like with these building blocks and how it all comes together. And as engineers, as operators, as SREs, how should we think about it?
I'm usually a big one rather than just technical on some of the story part of it, right? Because I think it helps put pieces, and as you might have already realized, put
Please.
pieces in perspective. Uh,
Yes.
air traffic controller deals with a radar, right? In
Mm.
real time has to
Yes.
avert a mishap in the first place. They cannot go have an incident. But if an incident ends up happening, there's a black box out there to allow you to sort of go debug and understand
Right.
what went wrong. And what went wrong necessarily is not always just technical in that case, right? It could be process, it could be so many other miscommunications and other pieces
Yes.
within the cockpit or completely uncontrollables beyond the point of the machine, so to say. Uh, and I think
Yeah.
if you think about that, ATC is almost an SRE, if you will, right? An ATC operator in this case. They're dealing with high pressure
Yeah.
situations in real time to be able to figure out what can they avoid completely right now. So being able to have the right piece of information with them right then and there makes a big difference in terms of what they're dealing with and how they respond to it. In factuals, what does it translate into is you have a massive deployment supporting millions of users globally. Uh, the time it takes to recover if something goes wrong cannot be in hours. It has to be in seconds or minutes.
Right.
And to be able to
Right.
do that effectively in a constant battle of newer edge cases being found uh, is the real problem to solve. We do that through not just leveraging context graphs that we have, but also leveraging today the AI elements to come together to fundamentally drop
Nice.
how do their end users experience less and less of issues with the software and the services that they provide to make sure it becomes a very
Right.
amazing experience. That really comes down to it. So platform teams, engineering teams love us because today the way to solve that problem is just the lack of fidelity, if you will, but also the fact that this data
Mm.
sits across 10 different tools and being able to correlate
Right.
that all together is a nuisance. Now, this is telemetry data, right? And
Yeah.
fundamentally, if you think at a rather than an abstract at a specific technical level, the problems you're dealing with, big data used to be called as if you have two V's out of the three V's, it's a big data problem. The three V's were
Mm.
volume, variety, and velocity. If you think
Yeah.
about telemetry, it's dealing with all three kinds of data. It has volume problem because
Correct.
it's being generated at TBs per day in terms of logs or traces and
Yeah.
things like that. It has a velocity
Yeah.
problem because of the rate of ingestion, the faster analysis that you have to do with it is even more higher.
Yeah.
And variety because of just the constant nature and the fidelity of the data. Right? So it's not just a fascinating
Yeah.
engineering problem that engineers deal with day in, day out as their systems start to grow. And the second big thing they're worried about is the cost of doing it. So combination of all of these
Correct.
forces creates a perfect storm for them to be able to think about and constantly obsess about what does it mean to understand your own systems because of the earlier mental model of
Right.
discovered versus imagined, so that you keep reducing the delta every day.
Awesome. Yeah. Three V's. When you were talking about it, I was remembering some past readings I've had. Uh, I do want to go into a little more of detail, but I want to take a step back where you mentioned and want to focus more of your founder journey now, a little bit about what happened. And it's not a, it's as they say, right? It's a 15 years of overnight success or whatever that number is, right? Overnight success is never like a one day, but I'm sure you may remember that day, that week, that month where you were like, you know what, I'm ready. And you were doing great, in your, at the work you were. I'm done. I have a team. We have been talking, mulling over this maybe some time. I finally have a plan. You know what? I quit. my job and I start, what were you thinking then? Like, were you focusing on team? Were you focusing on GTM? And I want to talk a little bit of GTM, Nishant, on this. I'm trying to figure out myself a lot of things around it, and you have figured few things out. We both are engineers. GTM generally doesn't come natural to engineers. I'm not talking about you or me, but most of us think more of engineering product user, right? So how did when you said I'm ready to start Last9, what was sorted in your mind and what were you still struggling back then?
Yeah, so I think I had a slight advantage of being able to do a couple, at least a couple more companies before Last 9, failing at it, succeeding at one, failing at the other. So I'll sort of go back even before Last 9 to start, because by Last 9 I had enough of a understanding of, okay, here's what I'm going to do and here's what will work. But the first company actually failed miserably because I was terrible at GTM, right? I complete.
Mm,
It was a company that I actually crowdfunded because. So there's been one thing, at least I don't know where it came from. Maybe reading a lot before I actually started, but I wanted to make sure that the
mm,
demand for what I'm doing exists before I actually go in full time. So the first company I did and the product I did was actually crowdfunded to make sure that there's enough demand around it that I can actually continue to fulfill.
amazing.
Uh, and that was a very different journey, though. I picked a hardware product to do in 2012, a completely
Oh God.
a complete curveball, overestimating obviously what does it mean to take the product to market and things like that. And
Right.
I had this funny experience now that I share with a lot of other founders to say, uh, first time founders are a sacrifice to the god of entrepreneurship, right? So that was pretty much my experience where I was burnt alive in that experience, doing it for 3 years. Uh, and being sacrificed to it to be able to come out on the other side and still survive to say, okay, wait, I'll actually like doing this enough to spend my time doing it. Uh, but
So you rose from the ashes. So what was the phoenix like? Where the tear? What were those tears from the phoenix? What happened there? Sorry to make
yeah,
it, but
so
I just have to build on what you were talking about.
no, that is true. That is true. That is absolutely the experience, right? And I think what it does is in times of crisis and constraints, fundamentally the clarity that emerges, I don't think it emerges at any other time, right? When you are pushed to the back,
Mm,
there are times when you just realize what is important and what is just good and not urgent. I think there's a big difference to that in terms of not just
yes.
from a perspective of prioritizing, but from a clarity of thought to say, no, I've found who I am. And I know it sounds a bit philosophical, but entrepreneurship, I think, is as much a internal journey as much people think about it
Oh no,
as an
absolutely,
outside,
absolutely.
which is very less talked about, at least publicly, I know, because there's nothing like it in terms of being able to, not necessarily from being able to put it on a pedestal to say it's the best thing that can happen, obviously to each their own, but in terms of being able to
Yeah.
understand your primary motives for doing something, what your value systems are, they're really tested to the core, right? And I think there are
Oh yeah.
certain things
Oh
through
yeah.
that journey. Sorry, yes,
No, no, no. Please continue. I was just saying, absolutely. I'm
yeah,
so much in agreement with you. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
yeah. And I think in that journey, what happens is that moment of clarity gives you either a renewed purpose or enough to understand yourself to say, no, this is who you are. And this is what you like, and this is what you don't like. Not just in terms of being a founder
Mm,
as a title, but in terms of the nature of problems you want to take on uh, and be able to build something that's ideally lasting long enough uh, to be able to go through
right.
it. And the biggest parallel, I'll continue, by the way, Surya, until you stop me, right? Because I have a lot of stories to
No,
share around
please.
this. Uh,
No, no. That's why I'm here. But I'll tell you one thing. I want to add on to what you were saying. And when you were sharing this, it reminded me of last year. Oh, it's 2026. So in 2024, I was visiting a college. They were it's not our college PICT, it was some other college. Somebody had invited me and they were running a startup fest kind of thing, and they had invited few founders. it was all kinds of like conversations, fireside kind of thing. So one question somebody asked from the audience: what should you expect, or what should you prepare in your startup journey? Something around those lines. And there were many good answers. And when the mic was handed to me, I said two things. First, startup journey and founders journey is about handling a rejection. You will get rejections more than you can think of. It's one of those V's, velocity. It will come so fast at you and in so many different ways, variety, that
And in volume as well.
if you can
Yes.
handle rejection as volume as well, exactly, right? Three ways. So you should prepare for that. And some rejections, even if you think you can handle rejections, they will hurt you. Your co-founder is rejecting you on something, your family, your friends, your customers, like everybody around, some like the intern you invested and you wanted so badly to hire her or him, and this person is like, oh, I got a better offer, I'm rejecting you. Like, you're like, what the hell? The other thing I shared is, and not to sound dramatic or cool, but I said a founder's journey is a very inside looking journey. It's a very lonely journey. You have to deal with yourself. You have to carry yourself, because maybe your best friend even may not be able to understand what you're going through. And it's not sad, actually. It's just what you chose. And if you can handle that journey, right, you are golden. So when you are saying this, I'm like, oh my god, yeah, it's so much resonance. But
Yeah. The equivalent to
so yeah,
that,
please
in
go on.
addition, Sujay, I give as an example, especially to young
Hmm.
folks, is have you ever flown a kite? Do you know especially in the hometown that we come from, there's no wind, there's no enough of space to go run around, and you want to fly a kite.
Yes.
It's just
Yeah.
and the PMF is not a blessing that everybody gets. Flying a kite is like PMF. It has to have that pull.
Correct.
The kite pulls the thread
Correct.
together to actually run away from you in some ways, right? And I think along that
Right.
journey,
Right.
being
Right.
able to get the kite to fly is one of the closest experiences without a wind that I can explain somebody to what does finding PMF
Oh
look
my god.
like.
Yeah. And it's so funny we are talking about this where it is, there's a festival in India we'll all celebrate in a day, which is Makar Sankranti, and that's the
That's
kite
right.
flying festival, the biggest kite fire. So you
Yeah.
couldn't have timed it better, Nishant. Uh,
Yeah.
let's talk about, you spoke about GTM, all the past learnings.
Yeah.
So when you started Last9, were you absolutely clear about your GTM, like, or at least you had some building blocks on your GTM? Again, I will be, I'm not trying to influence what you're going to say, but assuming you still code a little, or at
Yeah.
least get into design, knowing you as an engineer and such a brilliant
Absolutely.
engineer, how does GTM, what struggles you have, if you can share one, as an engineer founder? Uh, does it, did GTM came to you naturally, or you have to work hard for it? Like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think for the longest time I did not even know what GTM meant, to be honest, right? Because what I meant is what I knew is being able to, if you are building a business, being able to get customers is what matters. And as much as GTM sounds like a structured playbook that everybody has figured out, I want to be honest. I don't think anybody has it figured out until the flywheel starts kicking in some ways for it to actually grow on its own, right? But fundamentally, if it meant, I approached it honestly as much uh, as a problem to say, I need to be able to get customers consistently to be able to make this grow. What does it mean for me to be able
Right.
to do it? Right. That was honestly my approach more than demystifying go to market and marketing, sales, and which you should do at the right point and is the right way to do it. But not coming from that background and engineering background, it meant I had to, how would I say, vibe in a few initial aspects of being able to make vibe sales, if you will, for a few initial aspects to see what sticks, what doesn't. to be able to understand what are really
Yes.
people trying to look for that I'm not saying or don't have in the product. What helped in the journey, having done it a few times earlier, is that, as I mentioned earlier, I really like people starting to pay before I even code. That's something because I knew the hard problem has never been engineering. The hard problem has been how do you make sure that somebody actually buys what you're building, right? Whether in the first
Right.
company it
Okay.
was a
Yeah.
crowdfunding problem or in the subsequent companies. In fact, I remember in the second company that I did, we had a customer calling me to say, what's the company's name? Because they wanted to send us money and we did not even have a company registered because
Amazing.
because that's something that I thought
Yeah.
you could always solve for. It's a paperwork problem. It's not something that I have to go and do, right? I just
Yeah.
need people to be able to
Yeah.
ready to pay before that. We didn't even have a company name then.
Yeah.
Uh, and things like that anchored me when we started Last9 to be able to go along a similar journey where I went and spoke excessively to a lot of CTOs, CXOs, VPs around what I was even thinking about the problem to say, is this even real? Right? Or is this just my problem I don't know how to solve? Or this is a problem that's common to
Yeah.
everyone that you are willing to solve and
Yeah.
pay for as well, right? If I solve it for you.
Yeah.
And I think along that journey, those
Yeah.
were the early steps that anchored me enough to be very close to people who are buying and using the product from day zero to see what does it really mean. I think the formation of go-to-market as we continue to build, and not that it's always a solved problem. I think go-to-market and PMF are
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
interrelated in some ways. Uh, to say what works at one stage, you have to constantly keep iterating as the world changes around you, and also what
Yes.
competitive landscape and everything else, and how customer preferences change, especially in the last 18 months when every week there's something new coming along. Uh, and I think to answer
Absolutely.
that briefly, sorry,
No, no, go ahead. I'm listening.
yeah, I think to answer that go-to-market question briefly is as much the only way to answer it and also a disservice at the same time because it cannot be encapsulated in a few words, but at the same time, the core struggles and the core focus, as long as I think we keep talking to people who are running into these problems day in, day out, I think the systemic effort to structure it gets stalled downstream because we see common patterns that emerge to be able to solve that and sort of structure it around that, right? Whether it's marketing, whether it's demand gen, whether it's brand marketing or product marketing. I think it just happens as a consequence of what stage and what journey you're on. And looking at those common problems to be able to solve for becomes a big boost to that.
I think it was COVID, 2020. Yes, I remember moving back. Yeah, 2019, I moved back from the US. And I remember 2020, the whole year, almost most of the year, we all used to love to get on a Zoom call or a virtual call. And we were like, wow, okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So may have spammed the hell out of people just talking to them that, hey, this is what we think the problem is.
Yeah.
And we want to build Cloud Annex, and this is what we want to do. But some of the conversations I used to have, I would say good 20-30% was with channel partners, was with MSSPs, MSPs. So as to schedule a meeting, hey, that I have this company, and then I have to present to them, this is what I'm going to build. And some of those initial rejections or reactions were hilarious. They were like, you are wasting our time, you have nothing. I'm like, no, but I will have something, I'm trying to figure out the GTM. Will you work with me? Will you adopt a product like this? Will you build services on top of this? And Nishant, I can tell you, those conversations have helped me more than the product conversations. Because again, as engineers, as practitioners who have been in the
Yeah.
industry, we know some of the engineering problems, users' problems, not everything, but we have some sense. But again, coming from a non sales background, non alliance background, you always want to validate, hey, am I thinking right? Is this something we could do potentially? And we are actually working with those partners now. So we do a lot of
Amazing.
channel work, and they still, some of them still remember, me reaching out and talking some crap, and they felt it was complete waste of time, and they're like, no, 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 it was good you reached out. And that actually helped build relationship over time because they've seen
Yeah.
the journey. They saw that, a team which had nothing, and now they are doing all of this work and making sure they are part of that work kind of thing, right? So,
It's
what does
actually
your
an
day look
amazing
like? Sorry, go ahead.
It's an amazing tidbit. I think something for most people to follow. I didn't do enough of, and wish would have done enough of in that point. To your point, I think not just beyond users as well, in terms of people who actually are going out and selling and what are they seeing becomes a huge win. Uh, to be able to have that data early
Yeah,
on.
I think it was just out of my insecurity or inability to sell. Uh, and I knew that again, a failed startup, first startup. Uh, I've seen living in the US what it feels like seeing your bank balance to have $20, and I'm like, oh my God, that hurts. And then I'm like, no, I think I need to spend more time on selling. So that helped. So I want to understand, like, you were in India, you were the company was doing well, but you moved, packed your bags. Now it's what, 3 years or 2 years you are in the
Yeah,
US? It's
that's
been
right.
that
Yeah,
long,
yeah,
and you are in the Bay Area. I wouldn't share your home address in the podcast, but uh, what does your like your day or your week looks like? Like you are on the road all the time, looking at pure sales, or you spend a lot of time with existing customers? And I'm trying to dig through, uh, like I'm trying to learn actually myself, right? Because I have this problem. I end up into sometimes go too deep into some things which I should not be spending time. And sometimes I'm at such a high level, and I felt I may have set up my team for failure, that individual for failure. How do you go through this? What's your mental model these days? Educate me, please. Help me learn.
yeah. I mean, I think we're all in a same similar boat, right? The core challenge is always it helps to have an amazing team around you, which does the heavy lifting in so many ways, right? I think so. It's a bit of a privilege to be able to work with people alongside you who go in hard every day, trying to make not just existing customers have the delight of an experience in whatever ways, small, big, they can, but also being able to work with a team that will take a bullet for each other to be able to go out and work with these new initiatives, new customers, and new leads, and all kinds of marketing efforts. The exciting part is keeping some fun included in it, which is either coding in spare time to keep the uh, being able to still be yourself at the end of the day in terms of what you
Right.
really enjoy doing while going out. And most of my week though ends up being about 30% product marketing and sales, right?
Mm.
Divided around that roughly at the scale that we are. Visiting customers or new opportunities, being able to do that remains key. But it's such a pretty standard looking, on at a macro level, it all looks same. But I think the fun is in the details
Yeah.
where you're actually going and working on something more deeply. So to your point, I actually enjoy being able to go down rabbit holes. And being able to solve certain things because that's only way to keep sane honestly in such a world of a rapidly changing.
Oh my God.
But
Thanks,
that's
thanks for sharing that, Nishant. I love. I'll tell you why it's a validation, because I do that, and sometimes I feel guilty. I'm like, oh shit, did I waste time figuring this
yeah,
out? I know it is important. I know it made me happy. I tell, and I used to tell this actually in the college days. I used to write a lot. I used to program a lot in college days, and there were all these assignments available
yeah,
which we could copy, but I still used to write stuff. And and so I'm like, why do you do this? And I used to say, I felt coding is like poetry. It helps you think. It you can rhyme things. You can make it fit in a what you'll call a meter, like in a
yeah, yeah,
rhythm, in a pattern. I used to love that shit. I still love that,
yeah.
and
I think the
it just
biggest
makes me sane.
difference
What you're
though,
saying.
yeah, in addition to that, is going from an engineering background to a go-to-market background. I'll tell you the hardest
Yeah.
thing I felt is the feedback loop. It is so
Mm.
insanely hard to know what works and what doesn't. Uh, and that is a such a big challenge where code feels an easy comfort food, if you will, because
Right,
the
right,
dopamine or the feedback loops so rapid that it changes how
rapid. Yeah,
excited and how deep you can go, how quickly. Just because the feedback loop, you
yeah,
know you did something, it works. So it's a bit of a reward effect in action as a human, right? To say, oh, it works, it works, it works. And so you
yeah,
keep going down that hole, which is the amazing part
yeah,
about
yeah,
being
yeah,
able to solve problems as engineering or anything else. But on the go to market side, the world is a
yeah,
harsh place. You say something, there's nobody out there listening to you, or nobody cares.
yeah,
Why should they listen to you? So being able to have
yeah,
that level of either a discipline or an understanding to say, wait, it's just doing it every day still matters because it's
yeah.
going to play out in the long run. I think it's a very different rewiring that I went through over the years. So just understanding what the feedback loops look like and just trying to make sense of them honestly.
I should admit this, and I don't know if everything I say, how politically right this is, or am I putting myself to look like an idiot? But when I was an engineer, and we both have worked at multiple places, we had amazing sales team. I used to always wonder, what do these sales guys do? Like, why are they not selling? They make us work so hard on this feature, and why is the revenue not growing? All that stuff, right? And now when I'm on sales, I'm like, and I use this, I share this with my team also, that guys, listen, you're talking to your computer, and your computer is listening to you,
Yeah,
and it's behaving exactly the way you want it to behave, more or less.
yeah,
But when we are talking to the customers, the potential prospect, they may say yes, but they may not mean yes. And they may say yes because maybe they are figuring things out. It's not they are lying.
yeah,
Nobody has an agenda,
yeah,
right? Everybody's trying to do the right thing for their team, their organization. But maybe they said yes, but the other boss, or maybe they went through a merger and the other company said no, let's not go ahead, and they are still figuring it out.
yeah.
Which I don't know. As a sales guy, I need to just believe, I need to keep working. And and I try to generate this empathy. I try to generate, like, with these two teams, that have that respect for, and I wish I had that perspective when I was growing up professionally. So it's a very difficult job when you deal with
I
people. Anything you like, not just sales, dealing with people is extremely difficult.
Yeah, I'll tell you a
Okay, go ahead.
funny. My co-founder Kuldeep has a very interesting framing for this problem. Right, when we talk about engineering and selling, engineers have perfectly defined inputs,
Yes, yeah.
but very nebulous
Spec, yeah.
outputs. But very nebulous outputs. You can't really know if it's done. Versus sales, they have very nebulous inputs. They don't know what's going to happen, but
True.
they have perfectly measurable outputs.
Perfect. Yes, yes,
And
yes.
that
Amazing.
reflects in incentive systems, the way you sort of structure teams, how somebody gets measured, what does progress look like. And honestly, that's
Yeah.
such a fascinating way to look in terms of just building systems. Is that, to your point, right? Promising an outcome before you know inputs is what sales deals with, which, as you can
Right.
imagine, exactly
Right.
why it is harder, or go to market deals with is exactly harder because the world's changing. They have
Yeah.
to commit to a number before anything starts, and they don't know how they're going to be able to do
Oh,
it.
yeah.
And now figure
Yeah.
it out
Yeah.
and still commit to that number,
Yeah.
which is a completely different problem. When
Yeah.
you ask engineers to do that, they will revolt, saying, "How can you measure my output?"
Oh, yeah. 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 I mean,
So
sometimes it's even difficult to understand the story points, on, yeah, can you commit the sprint? Sometimes it's difficult to commit to a sprint.
yeah,
Yeah, I
and
know.
these folks go out and commit a year or a quarter way ahead and then have to go find ways for a product that's still being built, has buggy probably at times, and all of that make it
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
itself for a lot of
Yeah.
audience should
Yeah.
say why those two worlds are very different and what goes into one versus the other in terms of being the unpredictable and harder one.
100%. Uh, Nishant, I want to be respectful of your time. I do have many things to ask, but more importantly, I wanted to know a few things. You may have done few things initially, which could have gone wrong. Uh,
A lot.
If you can share at least one, and I'm sure, and I'm sure you did something which maybe seems unconventional or maybe didn't make sense then, but you kept doing it, and which is really paying off right now. So these two things, like, and whatever you feel comfortable sharing, in your style, anecdotes or some numbers, examples.
Yeah, I think doing wrong a laundry list, so I'll have to pick something that I can. uh, I think let me start with doing right. I think, and after
Sure.
having done a few of the earlier companies and sort of working with them and lots of people over the years, uh, deciding who you work with today takes far more precedence for me than anything else
Mm,
in the journey. I know it sounds sort of typically, but I think that affects so much more in terms of what, not just the outcome, but what does the journey look like and what
amazing.
is possible versus what is not possible. That I think it's one of those elements that you have to obsess about and really think hard about day in, day out. Because that you're not, as a founder, going to be there everywhere, all places. So, what does it really mean to
Amazing.
be able to work with a team that shares that value system and continues making progress where you can take a bullet for them? Or I think become is very, very crucial, especially at early stages, and obviously continues to compound because that becomes the core of who you are as a company.
Oh, fear. Yeah. I think what I gathered is, over time, what is right is happening, and it's a learning, as you said, is rather than the outcome is always about the journey. It had always been about the journey, and on the journey, who
Yeah,
you work with, who do you
yeah,
want, uh, what cassette, what music you want in that journey, what people who are sitting beside you, what,
fantastic.
like, all of those details matter, right? What snack, and what's the route you are going to take, because you land somewhere, but the memories is never about the destination. It's always about things which went wrong, which went right, but you figured it out
Yeah,
with your team, with people around you, people with you.
yeah.
Amazing.
I think the things we could have done better in my experience over the years and have failed miserably at is iteration speeds matters so much more that even though you as an individual
Mm,
you, and this is more than just as a person but as a founder leading, when you believe in something and you can't sort of have that change happen soon enough and it stays on, the whole purpose gets defeated, right? So
how
if
do you
you,
deal with that, please? This is very close to my heart. How do you deal with that?
yeah, which is the
Do
setting. It's
you
been a failure. I've been through it numerous times. That it's not easy, but through the will that you can muster up every day to go in and make it happen. The learnings initially, which was saying, a lot of these learnings are at a personal level rather than something prophetic,
Yeah,
uh, because
yeah,
it's as much a leadership journey in terms of what does it mean to continue leading an organization through growth, through founding and other places
correct,
to be able to push it ahead. There are days when you are not your best. You still need to get up
true.
and you don't get a chance to be able to say, oh, today's day off, right? So there are a lot of the journeys over a period of time in terms of not that you want them, but there are just sometimes you need to be able to take those time aways. Uh, but being able to lead and sort of have that intensity going in day out, where you are the chief intensity bearer
Yeah.
of on the organization, I think it's a very different mental shift you have to go through to actually act that way and get the team to realize that. I think it's very easy as humans to
Mm,
fall into a comfort zone, no matter how harsh, live through it and still
true.
be comfortable and just not ignore everything around in terms of what's happening for survival. And I think being able to have that intensity across going in, day out, and getting everybody to realize is been a harsher learning, not something that came naturally to me.
Mm,
But over a period of time, I've been very aware, so to say. to be able to make that happen and make sure I come on the right side, not just for the sake of intensity, but for the sake of outcome again.
Right, right. Uh, Switching gears, it's 2026. Uh, if you don't talk about GenAI, uh, I feel we will be shot in the square or burned down to death, something like that. You know, it's frowned upon that. "Eh, how come you don't have GenAI? Don't talk about GenAI." Uh, I don't know to stretch a lot on this, but somebody in your position who has seen a world which is like 20, 25 years ago, very different world, and now what are you looking forward in 2026? It could be GenAI for Last9 or using GenAI, which is pretty much baked into Last9 for the customers. But what is one expectation you are looking forward to uh, in 2026 from this so-called GenAI or whatever it means?
I, I think more than specifically GenAI, I'll sort of talk at the abstraction to say, for the longest time, Sujay, data was programmable. You always had databases, code
Mm,
to sort of tamper around with data. Then along
mm,
came Web 2 or standard APIs and things like that. And suddenly information was programmable, right? In terms of what you could exchange.
nice.
Now, today, the most fascinating thing is that knowledge is programmable.
No, no. Yeah,
And
nice.
I think that's a very different sort of arc in terms of we're very early in that arc to just figure out what does it even mean to be able to program
Yeah,
knowledge and
yeah,
have systems take over that knowledge and build that knowledge on their own. And I think that excites me,
yeah,
fascinating, right? Not just as markets change in terms of how we move upper on the abstraction from data, information, knowledge. But what does it mean for
yeah.
not just product, but companies, for end users to be able to translate that into something that's so that I think it's a very exciting time to not just be building,
Mm,
but we're building for a world where it's a completely new paradigm, whether it's Gen AI or not, right? I think the fundamental aspect I'm
yeah,
excited
yeah.
about is that knowledge becomes programmable and what can you do with it? I think it's such an open statement that should excite all of us to go build uh, along that path.
Dude, you should write a post on this. I love this thing. It's amazing. I'm gonna use it a lot. Uh, but you should also elaborate on that. It deserves a post of its own, a conversation of its own. I know
Yeah.
you have a hard stop. Uh, I want to ask about few things on how do you uh, going back to some metrics, some GTM, around some sales, around some engineering. We all have North Stars. I understand revenue, and there are so many of them. But for you personally, not for Last9, but you, what are some of the metrics have helped you to come this far, and you look forward to using these metrics in this year also?
Yeah, I think very interesting. Obviously, revenue remains a lagging metric in so many ways, right?
Mm,
But I think there are
mm,
too many conversations along the way where uh, people talk to you not just about the product, but what you're doing, what you're building, and
mm,
why it's an important thing to them personally, where it's not about you anymore, but it's about them. I think is a very fascinating
mm.
moment where they're dealing with this in their own ways, using what you have probably helped nurture, but now it is
Right.
theirs. And that's a very different experience to sort of go through, where as much as they are using this day in, day out, probably more now than you ever would. Uh, and they
Yeah,
come
yeah,
back
yeah.
with things where it's their own and they deal with that identity in a very different way and very fascinating ways that you feel proud that you built
Nice.
something along the way. But from a go to markets perspective, I think it is this resonance to some of the problems that comes through in terms of practitioners willing to go about, try things out. Uh, in terms of key metrics, it could be as simple as time to value. if you will, in terms of how quickly they were not just able to have the aha experience and recognize that it was an aha experience. I think yes, it's a very product centric part because today I think while building has become easier, building products still remains a key part of it, where you're able to go solve a problem
Totally.
for a customer in the fastest way.
Totally.
So I think that
Totally.
still excites me, being a primary engineering and product build and systems. That's where my love for building, I think company becomes an expression of that. And I think
Yeah.
it comes from there.
Yeah, yeah. I was talking to another founder, and we were talking about a few things, that how simple things have become and all. And I was telling him that, hey, remember the time when you used to code in C? Uh, Malloc was such a pain. There were so many file handles and all.
Right.
And then came C++ and then came Java and on. We felt that, oh my God, this has completely changed the things, and it's so easy. It not really, right? You still have to think, you have to still design,
Yes.
right? You have to still go through understanding users pain. You have to understand so many things, even after, even in the Gen AI world. You know, sure, there's faster way to do few things, but what you just mentioned, building product is still a craft, is still, you have to be patient, you have to learn, you have to be observant, all of those things, which have
Yeah.
been there in the past.
Yeah.
Nishant, few questions, and I want to give you a break before your next assignment work meeting starts. Maybe we'll get into some rapid fire. Uh, I asked this question. I've been told by one of my friends. I don't think you should ask that question, but I don't know, Samir. I like this question. What would be your persona animal? What represents you? Like who do you relate to?
Mm.
If as a persona animal.
Man, sounds. I think an eagle.
Oh, very
I mean, not
interesting.
animal, not from an animal, but from
Okay.
a bird perspective. But still, I sort of come
Well,
assume that to be the whole spectrum of what
yeah.
you were
No.
going for.
No.
So
Totally. 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 Uh,
yeah.
I don't know how much you read. And for the audience, this is completely unscripted. Nishant didn't even know what we are going to talk about. None of this actually.
Yeah.
Uh, do you read? And if you read anything you want to share, you read recently or might have read in the past, which has greatly influenced you, your thinking?
I think I read quite a lot, but these days, I mean, not these days, but I actually don't read a lot of technical stuff, at least in books. I read a lot
Mm,
of other random stuff.
mm,
I recently completed just last week, as part of the new year, a book around ancient DNA and the new science of the human past. I just completed that a couple of days ago. That was fascinating read to me because how DNA has shaped unearthing and looking at anthropology in terms of human origin. I think has completely
mm.
shifted in terms of how I and felt like it's something should be taught in schools to the degree where they no longer talk about social studies, but they talk about how we evolve. To that degree is what it has influenced me. So it's been
Oh
fascinating as
my
a
God.
recent
What
read.
was the name?
It's called Who We
Do
Are
you
and
remember the name
How.
of the book?
It's called Who We Are and How We Got
Who we
Here.
are.
Uh, there's
Sounds
another
very
book.
interesting.
I mean, there's a lot of such books that I read. Last year, I read a couple of books. One book is called Endurance. Uh, I think that's a
I've heard about
book
this.
that
Yeah.
almost every founder should read, is in my opinion. It's a
Okay.
people should generally read about doing hard things, and uh,
Hmm.
that a fantastic book. There's another completely random book around writing, being able to express. Uh, read a book called Bird by Bird last year, and Draft Number
Okay.
Four. Both books deal with the subject of writing and expressing, more writing than
Interesting.
expressing. And they have so many parallels in terms of just understanding human life. I've loved the prose, and I just love those books. So those are last three books from last year that really stood out to me: Endurance, Bird by Bird, and Draft Number Four. This year I've already read one, and I loved it.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing. I'm gonna pick up some of those for sure. Uh, what does a vacation look like for you these days, last few years? If ever you took one, uh, even half a day off.
Yeah, no, I think spending time as much with the family, honestly, especially after the move to this area, being able to spend time and how different the American life is. I think spending time with them as much because they've made the journey with me as much as I have. And I think being able to do that and spend time
100%.
with them, I think is as important to make sure uh, I still get the liberty of doing what I want to do on the other days and make sure things are all right. So
True.
that remains key. I think that's the biggest best unwind. Wherever I am with the family, I think the location doesn't matter as much. I think I can spend time and be with them. I think it's
Yes.
fantastic.
Do you carry your laptop on your vacation?
Yes, absolutely.
Work
That is.
laptop, I mean. Dude, that's not a vacation. Then your work is with you somewhere. Oh my
I don't think, by the
God,
way,
man,
I think
that's
the
amazing.
boundaries of work life, I think, are too stretched today. I don't think in a world where, uh, especially folks like us who love what we do, the parallel I
Yes.
give a lot to my team as well is to say, if Sachin Tendulkar was practicing on a Sunday night, what do you think of it?
No
It's
way.
normal, right? It's nothing. It's all right. That's what they are, and it's just normal.
Yeah.
That's how we are. This is the life we have chosen. It's not for everyone.
Yeah.
That's okay,
Yeah.
but it's a life we have chosen, and we are
Yeah.
okay with it. So, not that we are Sachin
Yeah.
Tendulkars, but at least if we aspire to be, then that's the right path to be
Yeah.
on. Practice comes
Yeah.
before perfection.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't think any founder thought that he would or she would be the next Jobs or Musk or anything. They just love.
Doing what they do.
They
Yeah,
took this as a choice. They exactly. That's all it is.
yeah.
I don't think. I don't think most of the founders I know they think about the end goal. What you said. It's just the journey that that learning, right? So I get asked this a lot. Like, you had such a comfy life, US, and everything was going great, and you can still get a good paying, high paying job. Why are you going through this pain? The other person from point of view, and I'm like, I say this that honestly, I just like to live life in a non-predictable, in a non-linear way. There are many ways to do that, but
Yeah.
this is one of the non-linear ways to live life.
Yeah, I used along
So,
similar lines. I used to say, if you had to invest in something, why would you not invest in yourself, right? Uh,
mm, nice,
I'm investing in
nice.
me, and what better investments can I make than that? If I don't believe in that,
Yeah,
what else am I supposed to believe in?
yeah, yeah. And these investments are mostly about learning, about knowing who
Yeah,
you are,
and
your inner journey, is what we have been talking about. Yeah.
being able to make a
Amazing,
difference along the
Nishant.
way. So
Absolutely, absolutely. That goes without saying. So again, being I could not have started 2026 on a better note, and I mean it. I mean it. Uh, I remember our first conversation which we had. I remember our JW converse sitting in Pune at JW
yeah,
Marriott, all those coffee talks. I remember your first pitch, Google Maps
yeah,
analogy
yeah,
which
yeah.
you took, and I thought it was a
That's right.
brilliant analogy, brilliant way
Yeah,
to help the other person understands. Uh, you you are amazing. You are on an amazing journey. Thanks for taking time. I know you are very busy, but thanks for taking time talking to me, educating me, and hopefully, folks who are listening to this, they would love this conversation between us.
I hope so too. Thank you so much, Ajay. It was fun to be able to chat and to kick off 26 with you on this.
Finally, we ended up talking, after a break, after a long time. We both have been busy, but
Yes,
next time I'm in US or you are visiting India and our calendars
absolutely.
meet, we'll definitely meet up in person.
Absolutely. Looking forward to
All
that.
right, brother. You have
Thank
a
you so much. Take care.
great day ahead. Talk to you soon. Bye.